Matt, to you, what is vision?
For me, vision is it's really that shining beacon or that North Star I'm always pointing my efforts towards.
Yeah, I guess I would think sort of similarly. It's like a purpose, a thing that gets you up and drives you. I think of it as like an idea that I say, oh, like the world expands, like, oh, I think I could do that. Oh yeah, and you get compelled, and it's through that that the lens happens. So it's almost like the idea is the creation of a map, and then the first step of that is, because you don't know, or you've never been on this map, but you go, I think I want to go that way, and that's you taking step one. And that's like purpose allows that. Without that purpose, where would you go? You would have no north. When I speak to vision, I have referred to it as like a diving board of action. Like it is the thing that I walk up to, and it springs me forward because of its clearly defined trajectory. How, like, do you have one for your business? How do you define it?
Sure. So I currently run a software development agency. The vision that we have for the future, really like in how we ground our company, basically, is a vision that the next class of blue collar workers in the world will be developers. And what that means is the working class of the world will essentially be development talent, developing digital solutions. And when I say blue collar, I don't mean that condescendingly. I mean, it's people that work with their hands. There's a large class of them. It's a learned skill that you need to, develop over time and learn how to integrate into a workforce. So when we're approaching solutions for our business, we're not just looking at our customers that need development talent and being like, all right, we'll build this website for you. We're thinking about long term and saying, okay, what are the types of things, how do we want to build our business? What are the types of solutions that we need to put in place such that we can facilitate bringing this workforce through us and into our customers? And that's really how we kind of approach things. So if our vision is achieved, we will have built the tools that makes and facilitates this easier, better than any other company that's in our same position.
What I really like about that is it clearly defines a objective for you. It sets a lens of what type of person you're looking for, what type of customers you're going to have. I mean, it gives you a thing to tick off and a direction to go towards.
Yeah, and I think if we think about supply and demand, so in our case, demand is the customers needing things developed, and supply is those development people. And if we think about supply demand, having that pointed viewpoint really provides it provides an opt-in, opt-out. It provides, well, am I their customer or am I not? And it provides, well, do I want to be a supplier or do I not? And it's pretty much an apex. There isn't an and or. It's I kind of like this and I agree with this, or I don't. Therefore, the people that end up doing business with us, really like doing business with us. And the people that don't probably really don't, but that's okay. They've got other places that they can go to.
If we know what vision is, what isn't vision?
It's interesting because at the end of the day, kind of vision is a concept. So anything could almost, you could really funnel anything in there. For me, it's those things that fall away from purpose. And again, I feel like you could almost say, well, anything has purpose. But when things are non-monetary motivated, I think that's when you get a strong vision. And when things are highly monetary motivated or financially motivated, that to me is when you actually lose vision. And that doesn't mean that like making money can't be part of it. Like, no, it absolutely can be. But when that's like the core tenant, I just think things fall apart.
You're not trying to create a business, you're trying to create money. So you're not headed in the right direction. Yeah.
Right. And the financial gain comes from the process of moving towards vision. It's not the it's the outcome if you work hard and you see a vision and you move towards it and you put your best effort forward. The outcome is financial. But if the only goal is financial, I don't know how you have a North Star.
I think that makes a ton of sense and is dead on. I guess I could add to that. It can't be tactical. It can't, it is if it's a star, there are so many tactical things that you might do in navigating towards that star, but those are not the vision. So don't confuse as some, little tiny actions with having a driving vision.
When we move through ideation, we break that down into a series of experiments that build upon each other. The process of breaking that down into individual experiments is what we like to call experimental thinking. Basically applying the scientific method to your thoughts and doing it in a systematic approach. The way to think about that is simply applying the scientific method to a thought, experimental thinking. So what is the process of the scientific method? How does the scientific method work? Well, basically what we do is we have a hypothesis. It's what we think the outcome of an experiment will be. The sun will go down today. And then I run my experiment. I stand outside for 24 hours and look at that. It goes down today. So my hypothesis has been met. So we have our hypothesis and we've got a bunch of variables. You'll see in later lessons here, things like our problem, our solution, our market, the various aspects of what are the variables of our thought. We're going to take those variables, come up with a hypothesis, and figure out how to test it. We're going to figure out how to go out into the real world and figure out, was our hypothesis met or not? Now, if we go out to the market and we say, all right, I've got my problem, solution, and market defined. My hypothesis is everybody in the world is going to buy what I'm selling. The likelihood of us actually achieving that on our first go is basically zero. It's basically zero for everybody. Doesn't matter who you are. You could be the biggest genius in the world. Your chances of success are zero. So rather than scrapping our whole idea just because we had a failure, what we can say is, well, maybe our hypothesis was just too big. So what we really want to do is start trimming that hypothesis down into something that's more measurable for where we are in our evolution of an idea. And if we're at the very beginning stages and things like our market or our problem are relatively unknown, what we really want to do is test a little bigger idea, a little something not so specific, a little something maybe not so transactional, and see if we're able to find something that is either true or alternatively something that's false. And if we're able to determine, if we go out and we test something and we find out that, oh, I thought A was going to happen and B actually happened, and I can determine why B happened, then we can kind of take that data and bring it back into our equation and figure out, all right, maybe my market needs to be tweaked a little bit so that I'll have a better outcome the next time I go and run an experiment. And every single time that we do that, they build on each other. And eventually those steps will add up and we will achieve that highline goal that we went out trying to find out and failed at. But over time, with putting little steps on each other, we're able to achieve it.
I previously knew someone wanting to start a financial blog, and they were wanting to focus it around families. What would be a good example of how he could have positioned himself and used experimental thinking to decide an early stage what he could do next?
He is kind of a solution, or his idea is really a financial based blog. It's going to be targeted specifically towards a demographic of couples ready to get married. There's really a million different places to start, but we just need to pick one. So what I would say is, what are some of the things that we could test here? One, we need to answer a question of, does the market exist? Meaning people that are ready to get married, do they believe they need this help? We could also go a question of, would that demographic consume the information in this fashion? So those are maybe two different questions that we need to get answered before it makes sense to really build. So in the first case, we asked ourselves, does this demographic believe that they need that information? Well, one of the experiments we could run to give ourselves a sense of, does that market exist or not? And another question that pops to mind is maybe, would these couples consume information from a blog? So we've got two maybe different questions that we could test as kind of really our first experiment. So let's start with the first one, really to validate whether or not this consumer base exists. So whether or not people that are getting married believe that they don't have the financial information they need to be prepared. Well, one of the experiments that we could run is simply going and asking people that are in the process of getting married whether or not they think that they have the financial information they need to be prepared.
That you probably wouldn't want to just walk up to them and say, You're getting married, right? And you know everything you need to know about getting married and all the financial situation. Now you probably want to speak something more to, are you and your husband going to have separate bank accounts or the same bank account? Oh, do you have plans for how you want to support your children's future? Are you guys planning to buy a home together? I mean, any of these questions, if their face goes blank, you can see that they haven't considered it. If they say, oh, well, they're defensive about it. So the way we position the language can definitely affect the result we get from their information.
Correct. And things like, well, how do we find these people? Where do we approach them? Those variables become really important, right? It isn't like we're just going to go up on the street and ask anybody like, hey, you getting married? I got a question for you. No, that's not going to work, because you're not going to get a thoughtful answer. You're going to get somebody that's trying to avoid you, which isn't really beneficial. So let's say we run that experiment. That's our first little step. That's our first experiment. The answer comes up, yes, they say that they need the information that we're going to provide. Great. Our hypothesis confirmed, meaning what we hoped and thought was going to happen, which was a yes to that question, was confirmed. Great. That's now a building block that we can build on top of. So let's move to our second question. Would couples getting ready to get married, would they go on a blog to get that financial information? Now, let's say we run another experiment, again, in the same fashion. Now, let's say the result of that experiment actually comes out negative. Rather than just thinking of that as not a stepping stone, we really want to think of that as, well, we got some piece of information. We got a piece of information that, yes, it isn't maybe what we wanted, but we did get another piece of information. We did build another step. Now, what's key when you get a negative question is to really ask a why question. And that really sets up your next experiment. In this case, we found out that these couples ready to get married wouldn't consume information on a blog. What we then want to ask ourselves in the next experiment is, why wouldn't they consume it through this medium? Is it because they don't trust blogs? Is it because they don't like to read and they'd rather have video content? And really, now we can add more variables onto the next test that we run to continue building that steps towards getting yeses as we build our experiments in our process. So when we think about what we want to achieve, that's really what we call vision. So vision is, if we could conceptualize, if all of our dreams and wonders were to come true, and we achieved everything we wanted, what would that look like? That's our vision. That's the peak pinnacle goal of what we think we can do. And that's this blue box. That blue box can be broken down, as we brought up, into modular little experiments that build on top of each other over time, and through ideation, we achieve our vision. Now, if we just think about vision, our wildest dreams, that can be very daunting. The process that we're talking about here is really thinking about that vision and breaking that vision down into a series of small experiments that build on top of each other, that over time will allow us to achieve those monumental goals. Now, the hard part about this is really, obviously, we've got one massive goal and one kind of micro goal, and there's something in between that needs to happen. The process that we're talking about is really one of trust. And what that trust is really saying is, if we focus on what our next thing to do is, that over time, those next things to do build on top of each other. And as we learn more and more and more and run more and more experiments, we incrementally get closer to our vision. Now, how we go about the process of moving through that is really through what I call the 5-step philosophy. So with the 5-step philosophy, we want to have 2 thoughts in our head at all time. One is our vision. Again, what we want to achieve. If we could achieve everything possible, what would that look like? And 2, what are we going to do next? So when we look at the 5-step philosophy, you'll see that step 1 is, what are we going to do next? And really, that's what we call our experiment. And then we've got step 5 out in the far right, which is our vision. And in between are steps 2, 3, and 4. And that's what we call execute. So that's where we're going to do something. Okay, that's what we're going to execute on, some work or something to achieve to achieve our vision. Now, We think about what are we going to do next. We're going to think about what is the first experiment that I'm going to run to determine if a trait or a thought or some little thing that is aligned with my vision is correct or not. And we're going to figure out how to run that experiment. We're going to run it and we're going to come back informed. And once we've done that, once we've gone and run that step one experiment, we come back, we find out that maybe we're right. We step on top of that block. Okay, and now we've moved from step one into what might appear to be step two in the execution. However, we always want to remember that the two thoughts we want to have in our mind are, what is our vision and what are we going to do next? And after we've achieved that first step, the next thing we need to think about is, what are we going to do next? So rather than getting caught up into all of the execution steps that I need to do to get going and accomplish my vision, the next thing we think about is, great, what is the next experiment we are going to run to inform me a little bit more that this thought, idea, concept that I have is going to get me closer to my vision? And we do that over and over and over. And those incremental steps build on top of each other and move us towards our vision.
We speak to vision as these driving things, the things that get us out of bed, our North Star, our deep motivation, what the be all end all would be if our highest dreams came to fruition. Being an interplanetary species is a pretty lofty goal, but vision can also be something much more approachable. There are many examples of people where they were just trying to solve a problem for themselves. They had an issue, they found a fix, and then they found out that, well, their vision of having a more comfortable instance, well, there was a market for that, and they had made that solution. The reason we put things vision first, if you're simply seeking a solution, it might not be the correct solution. So you want to have a clearly defined vision, and that is your need. And so it can be grandiose, or it also could be quite simple and approachable. So let's look at the squatty potty, for example. You know, his original solution, if he had a need, I need to sit and have a better experience on this toilet, he might have said, well, a solution would be that a slot comes out and then it's built into the toilet. I need to go talk to every toilet manufacturer. This is going to change the world. That is a solution. It works. But that's a very complicated route to market. So by going through these processes, he might be able to see, oh, well, you know what? I could make it out of a very affordable piece of pre-molded plastic, much more approachable and feasible solution.
You know, anybody can really get lucky. I come up with a great idea and maybe it sells, maybe it doesn't. But what's cool about this process is we're really trying to raise our chances. So we're not just relying on having a great idea and getting lucky. We're trying to develop a process for, cool, I've got maybe a great idea. How do I analyze that and tweak it? So when I actually decide to put the money behind it to blow the doors off and see how it does, that I have a much higher degree chance of success, and that I've learned a lot along the process of getting to the point where I can actually push this into the market.
So let's jump in and talk about the ideation vision board for a minute and how it's constructed and how it's designed to help. So if you look at the ideation board, there's really 5 boxes on it: vision, stakeholders, problem, solution, and feasibility. These are kind of the cornerstones of an idea or a business or a concept that we're going to try to push forward. If we look back at the 5-step philosophy, basically coming up with each one of these and filling in each one of these boxes, essentially its own little step. And once we've got them filled out, then the next step in it and how we move our ideation forward is actually to run little experiments to test whether or not what we've put in that box is actually true or accurate, or could be informed more, or needs to shift or change to actually kind of meet the reality that we're trying to find out in the world.
So what I like about this board is it's meant to be very simple and start you quickly down a path. The reason that vision is at the top and takes up so much space is this is meant to be the anchoring thought through which all the rest of it is perceived. And so this is meant to be a rather cyclical process that we will build on all through this initial vision step, and then each one being a portion of that test of our vision and it to reality. So then if we find out as we're going along that is not correct, we can adjust our vision and start again. It's meant to be iterative, quickly and systematically, so that you can spiral through your idea. And if you think about it, maybe like this ideation model canvas is almost like the base of a cyclone. You are starting with you have your initial idea, the cyclone begins, and then you build in some logic to it, these minor tests to say, oh, this could be a thing. I'm going to learn more. And you will then build up to your next step. Or, no, this isn't for me, and you can drop. But instead of wasting months, you can iterate on yourself quickly and push through or negate an idea.
Right. So it's about having something and having a place to start. And those first steps are very small. And that isn't to say the only thing you'll ever do in your business is use this ideation vision board. Obviously, there's all sorts of other steps that need to be done, which are a lot larger steps. But if you've started with these small steps, taking those larger steps in the future will seem incrementally easier because you've already covered a lot of groundwork and have gotten accustomed to simply building on what you've already done.